In this video, we're going to talk about built-in libraries in Python. So far, we've only talked about functions and pieces of code that are included automatically whenever the Python compiler starts up. But there are some libraries that are included with Python that extends its functionality. And so the way for us to do that is to get access to these libraries is with the import statement, as you can see here. And so you say import and then whatever the library name is. The library name is a single library taken from this URL here. This is the Python documentation. There's a huge list of different built-in libraries that are here. There's times that you want to see what's available in a library, and the way to do that is with the dir command. And so you say dir, an open parenthesis, the name of the library, then a closing parenthesis, and it will list out the variables, the functions, everything that's involved in that library that's defined that you can use. There's several dozen, if not hundreds, of libraries that are available to you for you to use. But we're only going to talk about 3 today. And those libraries are random, sys, and OS. The random library, this allows us to be able to generate random numbers or to be able to choose a random number out of a list. Random choice, we provided a list of items and it will randomly choose one of those items out of our list. So for example, if we import random and then let's say we've got a list of restaurants that we like to eat and we're having a hard time choosing which restaurant to eat at, we can create a list of those restaurants and have Python tell us, give us a random element out of that list. So in this example here, we've got Wendy's, Jack's, Arby's, Olive Garden, and Taco Bell. And in this example, it returned Jack's. So that's where we'll be eating lunch today. So that's neat. You can provide any list that you want, just while it's a list, and it will return one of those items from the list. It doesn't necessarily have to be strings. It could be numbers. It could be whatever you want. That's what the next example shows here. Is we have a list of what looks like a random numbers from one, well, mostly primes, but there's a few of these that aren't prime numbers, like 23 isn't prime, but well, maybe it is. Yes, it is. So here's a list of prime numbers, and we have it return one of the items, and it returns the value of 17. There's also a function called randint, and it's actually rant with a and then a lowercase int. In my notes that I have right now, I'm using an uppercase I, and that's not right, I don't believe. And so to pick a random number, we pass it a start value and an end value, and randint will return a random value between those that start and end value. So let's say we want a random number between 1 and 5. We could write the following code: import random int, randint 1 to 5, and it will return a value between 1 and 5, including 1 and 5. One thing I want to note out is for each one of the examples I've got here, I'm importing random to begin with, and then the code I'm wanting to run or the function I want to run. You only have to use the import statement once at the top of your program. You don't have to reference it each time. I'm just assuming that somebody's going to kind of copy and paste one of these examples and not do a lot on the others. So if we bring up Thony here, we can import random. If we want to see the contents of the random library, we can type dir and then random. And this will output all of the contents of random. If you look here, you'll see choice, which is one of the functions, and then rand int is another value here. Notice it's lowercase I. I will fix that in the notes so that way it is correct. And so we can type in here random choice 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will return a random value. Notice each time I run this, it's returning a different value. Sometimes it's going to be the same because there's only 4 values. So 25% of the time, it's going to return the same value. You can also specify a string here or a number. It could be any type that you want. So here I have 3 different types. I have 2 strings, 1 integer and 1 float. And Python's just happy, just as happy as could be to return any of those values. Doesn't matter, just while it's an element of that list. So want to know more about the random module? You can click on the link there and it'll take you to the documentation for random. There's a ton of functions and things here. Feel free to read through those. I'm just showing you the ones that I see as being very, very useful, ones that you probably will use definitely. So like here's the documentation on the rand int, A and B return a random integer n such that A is less than or equal to n, and which is less than or equal to B. This is also an alias for the rand range. So you can look up here at rand range, and this gives you a little bit more information about rand range and its history, things that's been changed, stuff like that. So feel free to look through that documentation. The second module we'll be looking at is the CIS library. And the CIS libraries provide some functions and variables that are used or maintained by the interpreter. It has an interface to the computer system, the underlying stuff like the operating system, stuff like that. So for example, here, we can import sys, and then there's a variable called function. There's a variable called version that will return certain information about Python, like the version that's running, also certain things about when it was compiled, August 1st, 2022, and the machine that it was compiled on. Yours may look different, but if we bring up Thony, we can import sys. We can do sys version, and we can see the version that is run under Thony, which is the same that I'm showing you in the notes, at least this version of Thony. There's also another variable called platform that will show you the platform that it's currently running on. And in this case, I'm running this on a Windows 32 machine, actually Windows 10. If you want to see what other functions are available and what variables are variable with sys, do a dir sys, and we can expand the shell, and here's all of the variables and functions that are available. Notice here is version, and here is platform. But there's many others that you've got access to if you need access to them. Also, you can look at the Python documentation, which there's tons of information here for different variables and functions. One of them that might be somewhat useful to you sometime in the future is the CIS202, which if you write a program on the command line or you execute a program on the command line, you can pass extra arguments to your program, and you can see what those are with this sysargv. You can see exactly what arguments were passed to the program using sysrv. There's other functions down through here. Feel free to look through those. I'm not saying that they're not important, but the ones that I show you are ones that are almost 100% sure that you will be using those in some programming that you do. The platform is really good. The sys platform is good if you want to write a program that will work on multiple operating systems, one that'll program that'll work on Linux, one that'll work on Windows. You can write one program that will run on all the different platforms. The third function, or the third library we'll be looking at, is the OS library, and it provides us a way to look at certain things dealing with the operating system on the machine that the code is running on. Sometimes we want to do things with files on the operating system, and so if you want to remove a file, let's say, you might write a script that maintains a directory or does certain things to a directory. And so you can remove a file by using os.remove, and that will delete an existing file. Of course, the file has to exist. If the file does not exist, you'll get a file not found error. And so you may need to use an exception to deal with that if the file does not exist. And so you would call the function like this, where file name is a string. And so here's an example. If in our current directory that we're executing our program, if we have a file called myfile.csv, this code will remove the file if it already exists. If not, we'll get, it'll raise an error. So let's look at the OS module here. And one variable that might be important is the OS name, which is similar to sys platform. It does give slightly different names. If sometimes one works better than the other. So depending on your situation, what you're trying to do, you may use sys platform or OS name. Also, if you another variable that's important sometimes is OS environment, or however you want to pronounce that. What this does is it gives you access to the environment variables that the operating system has defined, or the user has defined. And so then you can customize the way that your program runs by looking at the environment variables and then executing something based on some variable. A place I used to work 4 years ago, they would create an environment variable that specified the type of machine. Is it running in test or development or production mode? And so it'd be like the mode, kind of like the mode of the machine is the script could look at that environment variable and figure out if it should behave a certain way based on if it was in a test mode, a testing mode, a development mode, or a production mode. And sometimes what that has to do with is maybe what machine to look at for, like accessing a database or a file system or a directory in a file system or something like that based on that variable. So that adds flexibility where you don't have to go in and modify your code a whole lot. And it just it just kind of works. There's a lot of different variables of functions in here. Feel free to kind of go through and look at some of these if you want to. You don't have to know these for a test. It's just that if you're going to be a Python programmer or you're planning on writing some Python code, instead of trying to write a bunch of code by yourself, you might be able to use some of these libraries and be able to cut down on the time it takes to write some of the code yourself. There's a lot of helper functions and libraries out there to help you with this stuff. Another thing I want to talk about, and it's actually in the CIS in the CIS library, is there is a variable here called path. Let me see if I find it right here. And this specifies the path that Python uses to whenever it's trying to import a library. So whenever we say like import random, there's a list of directories or list of locations that it's going through trying to find that random library. Whenever it finds it, then it imports it. But it'll try to go through that whole list looking for the module you're trying to import. So if you want to see what your path variable looks like, you can type path. And so what happens is Python, what Python will do is it will start with this first directory if you do an import, and we'll try to look for the library in that location. If it can't find it there, it'll go to the second location, then the third, fourth, so until it runs out. And then it will output an error saying it can't find the library. The reason, one reason why I bring this up is because sometimes if you try to import something and it looks like weird things are happening, like your functions that you've defined aren't there, or something weird's going on, you might be your Python may be looking in the wrong location for the library. And so one way to see where a certain library lives or where it was executed from is there is a file variable that looks like this: file underscore underscore file underscore underscore. And that tells you where a file is located, which CIS is a special one, so that doesn't work. But if we try random, this shows us where it imported that file. So if you do this for random, and you would get a slightly different path here, you could actually load this up if you want and look at the random module, that file, and see how that works. You could see how random works. You can do the same thing, I believe, with the OS one. Nope, it's, did I import it? Let me try it now. Okay, yeah, there it is. So you can go through these libraries and see kind of how they work if you want, if you're interested. So this is very useful, especially if you're getting behavior that doesn't seem to be expected. Like, for example, a library, a variable or a function doesn't exist that it should exist, or the way it's executing seems to be really weird and not normal. You can see exactly, you can troubleshoot a little bit by looking to see exactly where the file was imported from. And lastly, if what you're trying to do, there's not a built-in library, there is a Python website you can go to that has thousands of libraries that you can access. And the website for that is pypi.org. And if you go there, you can look at, there's a ton of different libraries that are here. You can actually search by something, or you can click on Browse Projects. If you click on Browse Projects, it comes up with some different, like a classifier here where you can go through and specify something. If you're wanting, like, for example, something to do with email, you can click here where it says email, and it'll list all of the libraries that deals with doing something with email. So if you're wanting to write a program that does something with email, you've got all those that are there. You can also, if you are interested in a certain topic, you can also go here and type something like email if you'd like, and it will list a lot of any project that has email in the name or in the description will show up. So here is an email, or here's a library that will convert emails to PDF. And there's just a ton of these. Also, let's say, for example, you're interested in games, maybe to develop games or play a game. There's a lot of different libraries here that deals with that. And so you can search and see what interests you. There's, like I said, there's tons of libraries. Like right now, it looks like there's, for the different projects or packages, about 500,000. A lot of those aren't going to be real useful, but the last time I checked, there was, several thousand that seem to be very useful for different things that you could work on. So that's about it. Feel free to explore, experiment a little bit, look at the Python documentation for a lot of these different types of libraries to learn more about them. All right, I'll see you next time.